All right, I'm going to go on and hand you this. If you be turning your Bibles to Luke 15, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. And we're going to pick up there. We studied, there you go. Studied last week the parable of the lost sheep. And if you still have your outline from last week, we're going to cover the lost coin, but we're also going to add to it the lost son this week. So anyway, George, how you doing? There you go. There you go. You're welcome, Miss Katie. Miss Nancy, there you go. I know. I'm going to start with you one week. Just surprise you. But does anybody need one from last week, the lost coin? Already? That may be all I can pull out. Anybody else? All right, good. The parables there, we're studying parables. We studied kingdom parables. Now we're studying, now you could define them any different ways, salvation parables. You could also talk about their love parables, seeking the lost parables. You could define them a lot of different ways. But there are three parables, and they are all back to back. But they come out of, as we studied last week, they come out of a question, really, I guess you could say a complaint. Look in verse 1 and 2. This is Luke 15. First of all, you have seekers. You have the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him to hear him. You have those coming to hear Jesus, wanting to hear what he had to say. Then you had the complainers, the Pharisees and the scribes, and we talked about them last week. But they complained. They're according to Luke, what they said was, this man receives sinners and eats with them. Now, when you look at that, that is a complaint. But it's a truth as well, isn't it? It reminds us of the fact that when some folks look at us and even see the truth, that they look on the wrong side of it. And to be just brutally honest, isn't that really what we should be about? Receiving, as he says, receiving those that are of ill repute, sinners. But not only just receiving them, not only just talking to these sinners, but also eating, fellowshipping with them. And that's what we should do. And so as we do that, then that's the complaint. And so Jesus, in the three parables that follow, tries to answer some of the complaints, the criticism that arises because of them and what they have to say. And we looked at last week, we talked about the lost sheep, and we called it love seeking. And in many ways, we're going to talk about the lost coin. It's also love seeking, but the lost sheep of the shepherd that loses his sheep and goes and leaves the 99 to find the one because of the value to him of the one, the importance of the one, and the fact that he wants to save that one. Showing, really, Jesus trying to show the importance of just one. Not that the 99 were not important, valuable, tremendous assets. He's not saying that. But what he's saying is each person is important. Each person has value and wealth, and from the standpoint of a soul that needs to be brought home. We now find a lady that's lost a coin. Let's read the verses, if you don't mind. Beginning in verse 8, notice that he says, or. The idea there is, okay, let's look at a little contrast here. Or, if you won't consider the shepherd, how about the lady or the lady? Well, what about her? That woman. having 10 coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, search carefully until she finds it. And when she's found it, she calls her friends and neighbors together, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the piece that I lost." Likewise, I say to you, there's joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. He says, let's consider this woman. And notice that she has 10, as it's called here, 10 silver coins. This is a Greek coin. Your Bible has probably a footnote. My Bible has a footnote talking about the drachma. This is not equal to our penny, but fairly inexpensive, lower end value-wise coin. Ladies in biblical times would have some, and some of those coins might be heirlooms passed down from generation to generation, but most of them, and what a lot of folks feel was happening here, was that they would take about 10 coins and they'd make a necklace out of it, and they'd wear it, and that too would become a family heirloom that would be passed down. And consequently, something has happened to her necklace and she lost coin. Well, she considers that coin valuable. She considers it precious. And who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? I know I've heard, mothers had mother's rings. You remember mother's rings? They have the different stones of all the kids and the grandkids and the great-grandkids, and they might include their husband if they like them, but really not, because it's not their child. It's their hanger-oner. So anyway, I've sat with mothers and they'll talk about, I lost a stone out of my mother's ring. It represents so-and-so. And I searched to find it. I told you, last week, I shared with you last week, Suzanne, back a few years ago, lost her engagement ring. We never found it, but we searched. We even went to pawn shops to try to find it, and we didn't find it. We never found it. And so she is ringless, not really, but she doesn't have an engagement ring that anymore. When you lose something, you seek it, you search for it, and you're willing to search under everything. Now think about the picture that Jesus paints. We lose certain things and we look for a minute. If we don't find it, we just don't find it. If you've got something, maybe a little thread or something, a little crumb, and you think about, okay, I'm going to throw this away, and you look back at your fingers and all of a sudden you don't have it and it's on the floor, and you look, and, when I vacuum in 2 or 3 weeks, I'll get it, right? It's something that's not that important. But then there are things that we lose that are valuable. Lose your keys. You're going to turn the house upside down in order to find your keys, right? Lose your glasses. You're going to turn the house upside down to find your glasses. Why? Because those are valuable things. Those are things that are important. Those are things that you need to exist, continue on. This lady, she'd lost a keepsake. She'd lost maybe something that she had passed down from her mama to her. So she considers it of great value. So what does she do? Well, notice what she says. She would light a light. Isn't that one of the first things we do? We're in a room, even if it's daylight, and we've got windows all around. Turn on a light so we can see better. She lights a lamp. She sweeps the floor. She pulls out her broom. She sweeps the floor. She's searching, and notice the very next word, carefully. Carefully. She's not turning everything over and just ransacking everything. And mind you, with regards to a house, they didn't have much furniture. They didn't have many good, if you will, things sitting around. She is seeking, and she's probably searching not only in the house, but on the rooftop of the house and around the immediate area of the house. Where did I lose that? And so she finds it, though. Verse 9. And what does she do? She calls her friends. She calls her neighbors together. And notice that she doesn't just call them together, but she asks them to rejoice with me, for I have found the peace which I've lost. Rejoice with me. Be happy with me. Be happy for me. Paul said in Romans chapter 12, verse 15, rejoice with them that what? Rejoice. And weep with those that weep. Very good. And so she asked, be happy for me, but be happy with me. Rejoice. Rejoice for a reason, for I have found the peace which I lost. Now, let's just assume, don't know this. This is not part of the story. This just heightens our imagination with regards to the story for just a minute. If you lose something and you don't find it within the next little bit, what do you begin to do? Anybody you see, you begin to tell them, right? Man, I lost my coin. I lost my coin. I lost the coin. You remember that necklace that I used to wear? Yeah. I lost one of the coins out of it. Do you know that those coins I have? Yeah. That I got from Mama? Yeah. I lost one. You tell people. Well, now she's calling back. She's saying, rejoice with me. Rejoice with me. For I found what I lost. And so then the application that Jesus makes is found in verse 10. Likewise, I say to you, there's joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repents. Jesus is showing the value of one person again. Jesus is showing the value so much of doing and turning over everything you can turn over in order to find it. But when you find it, there's rejoicing. But not just rejoicing in the individual, but look what he says, rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God. When a sinner is found, every effort should be made. Every stone should be turned over if it possibly can be. And that's, of course, that's not always true, but we do the best that we can. And so we turn over every stone, everything that we can think of, everything that is imaginable that will help. You know, what do you do to seek and to save the lost? I was thinking just this week, through my ministry, I've been a part of and had TV programs. I've had radio programs. I've had mail out programs. I've done many different things like that. Don't regret any of it. All in an effort, though, to find individuals that would be interested in spending time studying the Word of God. Because what I have is some good news. What I have is the saving grace of God that I want to share with those individuals. I want them to go to heaven. And so, Jesus says, there's joy. There's joy. Notice what two lessons on that outline, two lessons that we might learn, and we can learn others. If you've got one, I'd love to hear it. There are more, but I just chose two. First of all, God seeks the lost. It's his desire that all people, according to 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9, that all individuals would be saved. He's provided all that is needed for salvation, grace, mercy, Jesus. He's left it up to us. His invitation is open. When you think about what has God done through the years to affect the lives of individuals, but he's, of course, his grace, his mercy. He's provided Jesus. He's provided his word. He's provided blessings. He's provided people to share the message with others. Now, you get back to it. The first parable that we studied was the parable of the sower. And when we talked about the sower, there are different folks with different hearts. And so sometimes folks listen. Sometimes they listen for a while. Sometimes they listen and stay for a good while, but sometimes not at all. And we have to know that, and we have to do what we can. And so then we do what we can. Well, what all do we do? Well, like I say, radio, TV, we have church. We invite people to church. We give out bulletins and newsletters and willing to give out Bibles. We're willing to do what we can for the cause of Christ to an individual. Send them notes, call them, pray for them, whatever we can do. Jesus is teaching that God seeks the lost. He doesn't just sit back. You might say, well, God's just sitting back and, whoever follows him follows him. Not really. He's provided. And so God seeks. But then a second lesson that we might learn is every effort should be made to find the lost and bring them back. Let him know that James 5, verse 19, let him know that he that converts a sinner from the error of his way saves the soul from death and hides a multitude of sins. It's our charge and our responsibility to teach. It's our charge and our responsibility to bring individuals with us. Now, I think we need to maybe, I wouldn't say put the pressure on a little bit better, but maybe we need to change our tactics a little bit. We sometimes look at folks and we say, hey, why don't you go to church with me Sunday? And that's it. Maybe we should up it a little bit and say, hey, I'll be by at 8:45 Sunday morning, pick you up, take you to church with me. You go to Bible school with me, go to church with me, and then following that, we'll go out to eat. I'll buy. Up the ante a little bit. Or maybe we just hug people a little bit and we say, praying for you. I want you to come back to church, or I want you to come to church, but I'm praying for you that you will. I'm not saying that we just put the pressure to the folks and just tell them they're going to hell. That's not the style, not the way. But at the same time, too, we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing to seek the lost that we know of? Whether they are individuals that have gone astray or they're individuals that have never heard the word of God. God wants everybody to be saved. So this parable teaches the value of the individual soul and the ends to which the Lord and all Christians should undertake to seek the lost. There is value in every person, and all are important to the Lord. There are other lessons there, but what lesson might you gain out of that parable? Well, all right. We've covered it up. Well, let's go now to the parable of the prodigal son. I've called it the lost son. We've often called it the prodigal son. Jesus is dealing with the same people, the Pharisees, the scribes that are complaining, the folks, the seekers and the complainers. Jesus is dealing with those, and he's going to show in this parable, one of the more lengthy parables, Jesus is going to spend time talking about a son that goes his way. We know the story real well. So what I hope to do as we go through, as we kind of march through these verses, is to give you some insights that maybe you hadn't thought of for a while, or maybe just a little twist on something that will give you pause for thought. But let's begin by reading Luke chapter 15, beginning in verse 11. A certain man had two sons, particular man. It's almost as if Jesus had in mind who he was talking about. He didn't just say a man, a particular man, certain man, had two sons. And the first son, the younger son, on your outline, I called him the consumer. The younger son of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood. Now, I want you to think about that for just a second. The younger son. By the way the old law was written, in the book of Deuteronomy especially, if there are two sons, the older son gets what would amount to 2/3, and the younger son would get 1/3. In other words, the younger son gets less than what the older son does. Now, us younger kids, we wouldn't appreciate that. We'd have to follow it. We wouldn't appreciate it. I told you about my sister, older than I am. When you ever see her again, the next time you see her, don't remind her she's older than I am. But she is. And she has two girls. The oldest one was probably, let me think about it, was probably, Ethan wasn't born yet, so she was 4 or she had just turned 4. And she's playing t-ball when she was little. Now, mind you, the girls are grown up and have children now. But she was about 4 playing t-ball, first experience. And Andrea, the youngest, had just been born in March or April. One of them's in March, one of them's birthday's in April. I have to look at my calendar. But anyway, and it's about June, the last of June. And Uncle Paul and Aunt Suzanne have to go see the oldest one play ball. So we have to travel a little ways to go watch her play ball. Suzanne is expecting Ethan at that time. But Suzanne and I are sitting in front of my sister. And it's a little warm. It's evening, but it's still warm. And it's, eating time for the little baby. And Carol is trying to pacify the little baby while watching her oldest, being the proud mama. There's my little girl playing softball or t-ball. And Carol is trying to quieten Andrea and get her pacified. And she says, I know it's hard being the younger child. I turned around immediately and said, I have been telling you that all of my life. You haven't listened. And that is a true story. Jay accused me of having preacher stories. That's Suzanne. That's a true story because Suzanne was sitting right beside me. The younger ones sometimes get mistreated. Well, that was the law, though. That was understood. But notice something else. This is not a Dad, will you please give me, or Dad, can you give me, or Dad, even will you float me alone? Dad, Father, give me what is my command. And notice that it says he divided to them his livelihood. I'll be honest, until I got to studying this again this week, I had never thought about something that I read somewhere that made this statement. He gave them all he had. Now, I don't know if that's exactly true or not. The story does not tell us. But it says that he gave them his livelihood. So imagine, if you will, if this individual's assumption is true, he has nothing left. Because he's divided his portion. He's had his will reading, if you will. Maybe you say, well, he just gave him his third, or maybe he just gave him a portion, but he gave it to him. He gave him his livelihood. Yeah. And that was the second. I'm glad you brought that up. That was the second thing that individual that I was reading said. That's where they got that idea from. It makes sense. I don't debate it. I think it makes sense because when you go and you get towards the end, sometimes you just soon it be divided before you so that they don't fight over it. So yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Verse 13, and not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. Not many days after, he'd made the demand. His father had given it to him. What does he do? Well, he gathers up his possessions. He doesn't have much. They didn't have much. I mean, it'd take us a U-Haul to move, right? It'd take our children a U-Haul to move. But not him. But he gathers up what he has. And think about it. He gathers up what he has. He's not coming back home. Children leave a certain amount with their parents, right? You know why they do that? Come home. That's their time. Come home. I was looking in our basement the other day, straightening it up and tidying it up, and I noticed 2 or 3 things that are Ethan's that we've moved here. He's getting them before long because I gave him a boatload of stuff when we moved. I said, it's not mine anymore. But it's his tie to Susanna and I. It's his tie to, even though this isn't home, because he never lived here. It's his tie to home. And so I understand that. I get that. This boy, though, takes on. He's not coming back. And he's going to a far country. He's not going next door. He's not going just a few miles away. He's going far away. I'm getting away from home. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. I'm getting away from it. But notice what he does with his money. He wastes it. He wastes his possessions with prodigal living, riotous living, some versions have. And when he had spent all, there's nothing left. He spent all that he had. He didn't make any plans for the future. He didn't make any plans, if you will, for tomorrow. He wasn't planning on a severe famine coming. And a severe famine in that land arose, so that he's in want. He needs now. He doesn't have anything. He spent it all, and he spent it all having a high old time. He spent it in riotous living. He's had a party all of his life, or all the time that he's been away from home. And now all of a sudden, the economy has broke, and things are tough, and things are rough, and it's hit his home. You know, things aren't rough if you really stop and think about it till it hits my home, right? It's not bad for him till all of a sudden it hits his home. And notice what he says. He went and he joined himself to a citizen of that country. In other words, he found somebody that was willing to take him in. Maybe somebody that owned a little bit, evidently, because they have some livestock. Some folks that had a little bit of money, sure, I'll take you in. Or, yeah, I can use a worker. Come on in. And so he says that, he joined himself to the citizen of the country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. Now, if this boy is Jewish, he's hit rock bottom. And you can imagine, if you think about it, the Pharisees that are there, the Jews of Jews that are there listening to Jesus, that have criticized him, going, he's going to feed the swine. He's going to feed the pigs. Surely not. Jesus wouldn't do that in this story. But sure enough, he does. Verse 16, though, says that he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. He would have eaten the very slop that the pigs ate. The pods. When I think of pods, and I've do research on the pods. Do you remember the pods that are on like mimosa trees? That's what I think of when I, through all the research that I've done. That would be as best I could get it to our equivalent. And so he would have eaten that. That's what the pigs were eating, but he would have eaten that. But nobody gave him anything. So he's hurting. He's hurting, and he's hurting bad. Says that he came to himself. There's been a lot of discoveries in our time, before our time, and depending on how long the world stands, after our time. Great discoveries. Penicillin, great discovery. Electricity, great discovery. A lot of great discoveries, a lot of great advancements. Suzanne and I just got new glasses. So if I look at you funny, it's really because I'm still learning how to see out of these crazy things. Although I can see you now. And you were beginning to get a little blurry. So I can see now. But I was thinking about them as we picked them up. Made out of plastic, the lenses are. Made out, metal. I was thinking about when we had chosen them about the week before. I was thinking about, they used to be made out of glass. They're heavy. I have bifocals. Help me read. Just kind of, the frames, you've seen them probably in old museums and places like that. Frames very, very delicate. Easy to be torn up. Of course, these are made, where they flex out and and things of that nature, but how they've changed. And I'm thankful for them because, like I say, now I can see you, and I can see what's up there and see a Bible. And if we didn't have glasses at all, what would you do? Great discoveries. But the greatest discovery that we can have is of ourselves. Who we are, where we are, what we are. And sometimes that comes, early in life. I'm a sinner, I'm lost. I can't save myself, but God can save me. And so, God, what would you have me to do in order to be saved? Sometimes it comes later in life. I've been privileged to baptize individuals really fairly young, 10. Ethan was 10 when he was baptized. I've been able to, or blessed, and maybe I should say blessed, to be a part of baptizing individuals that were in their 80s. And what a blessing that is to be a part of helping them obey the gospel. But the greatest discovery was when they came to themselves and they said, oh, this is what I need. This is what I need. I worked for 3 summers as an intern in my home congregation. And Dave and I would go out every Thursday night and knock on doors of individuals that were newcomers. And then one summer we canvassed the whole town. And I helped a boy. 2 days a week. We went just from door to door to door to door, just asking people, some questions. Do you have a Bible? Did you receive this book free in the mail? Yes. Okay. Did you not? Well, here's another one. Did you get would you like a Bible? Do you have a Bible? What version of the Bible do you have? Nobody knew what version of the Bible they had. Yeah, I got a Bible. We never did ask them when's the last time you read it. Afraid to ask that question. But been a part of that. And you go, and some of these people don't realize where they are spiritually. Have no clue. But in those 3 summers, the first summer, Dave and I found a couple. They had been coming to church, and he was actually a member. She was not a member of the church. She was raised, I think she was raised not going to church. We spent that summer, we showed her and him both. We showed him the Jewel Miller film strips. You remember that? That's when they were still film strips. We showed him the Jewel Miller film strips. We talked to him. Every Thursday or every Tuesday evening, if I'm not mistaken, we went and spent time with them. Nice young couple. She didn't obey the gospel. The next summer, Dave said, hey, they've been coming some off and on. He said, why don't we just go and visit them and see if we can encourage them? And so we did. They wanted to study the Bible again. And so we went through the Jewel Miller film strips again. She didn't know about the gospel. The third summer, Dave said, hey, we've been 2 summers working on this family. She hasn't obeyed the gospel. They come, like maybe once every 6 weeks or so. Let's go back. Okay, so we did. Third summer, we studied a little bit with them. Didn't use the Jewel Millers again, but we did something else. We studied, just visited, just talked. After a few weeks, they started coming. Before long, she was baptized for the remission of her sins. Took 3 years. But the greatest discovery was what? That she was lost. She was lost. This young boy has a great discovery. He comes to himself. I'm lost. I need help. And so the question then that he asks is, how many of my father's house, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? How many of my Father's servants have more than enough? And he says, here I am. I'm dying of starvation. I perish with hunger. It reminds us, too, if you stop and think about the fact that the blessings that are found in God's house. How many do we have, and are we willing to take it and share it with others? And so he says, verse 18, I'll arise, go to my father, and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Now he's willing to go back home. And part of the great discovery is humbling yourself, right? Lowering your sights to understand all of a sudden you're not just the one and only and independent. You're needing of God. You're needing of the Father, and he realizes that. And so, simply put, his confession here, I've sinned. I've sinned. I've sinned against heaven, and I've sinned against you. You know, you can sin against God and not sin against your brother, but you can't sin. When you sin against your brother, you always sin against God. He says, I've sinned against the family. I've sinned against Father of heaven. He said, I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Take the family name off. And all I'm asking is, notice what he says, make me like one of your hired servants. Just make me a servant. Just make me one of your hired servants. He thought that was pretty good confession. So he rose. Verse 20, he rose and he came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck, kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. Now think about the compassion of the father. I want you to picture the father. This road on Charlotte Pike is more traveled than you might realize. Just go out, sit in my front yard, and just watch. I mean, there's a car. If it's not coming, there's a car going. And some of them, especially coming off that hill, some of them have great speed. And some of the ones going want to see how fast they can go up it. So some of them are going pretty fast. And so the other day I went to the mailbox. And I trotted across the road. Why? Because there was a car that was coming. And I thought, ooh, I'm not 25 anymore. So you imagine this father, age, stiff, stowed up a little bit maybe. But he looks out and he sees his son. And he recognizes in the distance, maybe he sees the form, maybe he recognizes his face, maybe he's close enough where he sees his face and recognizes it, or maybe he's far away and he recognizes the form and he watches the gait, the walk, the steps of the young boy, and he recognizes him. That's my boy. Now, go back to the text and look what it says. He was a great way off. His father saw him and had compassion on him. He realized, my son is coming home. He didn't close the door. He didn't walk back in the house and close the door. He didn't walk back in or walk away. You know, see his son coming this way and walk that way. He didn't. He didn't even walk to his son. It says that he ran to his son. And notice not only that he ran to his son, but he fell on his neck and he kissed him. This was not just one kiss, folks. He continually kissed him. This is a homecoming scene if there ever was one. This is a Hallmark movie waiting to be made. So, as the son then has to take a step back and give that confession, that speech, if you will, as short as it was, he has to give his speech to his father. But the father told his servants in verse 22, bring out the best. Bring out the best robe and put it on him. And put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. Best robe. His clothes probably had gotten pretty well destroyed through the time that he had been living in riotous living, and now had gotten so far down that he's having to feed the pigs. Put a ring on his hand, sign of authority. He's lost everything that he had. If he left home with a ring on his finger, it's gone. Put shoes, sandals on his feet. Sandals were a sign. If you went barefooted, we would just say, that's comfortable in the South. But if you went barefooted in biblical times, in biblical lands, you were slaves. Otherwise, you wore some sort of foot protection, if nothing else but a rude, crude piece of material that was under your foot and laced through your toes and then laced to your ankles. You see, he'd lost everything this boy had. He had nothing. And so the father, willing to give him everything, and tells the servant, bring the fatted calf, the one that we've been saving. Ever save anything? Do you have a country ham stored back somewhere that you're saving for something? If you are, invite me. I'll come and help you eat it. You have something a little stored back. He had something. He had this fatted calf that he'd probably been holding back for a while. He said, let us eat and be merry. Let's have a party. For this my son was dead and is alive again. The dead there, he was dead. He was gone. We didn't know where he was. We counted him but lost. And now he's not lost. What is he? He's alive. He's well. He's here. He's home. He's come back. And they began to be merry. And so the compassion of the father that's willing to take the son back in. But then we have the older son. We called him the critical. The older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard the music and dancing. So you see, he's been out in the fields, he's been working, he's been sweating, he's been laboring, and he gets closer to the house, and all of a sudden he hears the party going on. And so he's wanting to know what in the world is going on. And so it says in verse 27, he said to him, when he asked the servant what's going on, he says to him, your brother has come home. And because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf. He said, your brother's come home. Now, think about it. The father didn't run away. The father didn't look at the son and say, I knew you'd come back. I knew you'd be back. I told you when you left you were doing it all for the wrong reasons. No, he took him back. Lovingly, compassionately, tenderly. But the brother is not so happy. Yeah, that scoundrel, he's come back home. And now look what dad is doing. And so he grows angry, verse 28. Seems to most of us to be a logical conclusion, right? Mad, he's upset, he's angry. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. You see, he wouldn't go in. I don't have anything to do with that boy. I don't have anything to do. He's not my brother. He gave up on this family long ago. I don't have anything to do with him. And so the father, he comes out. His pleading goes like this, verse 29. So he answered, said to his father, lo, these many years I've been serving you. I've never transgressed your commandment at any time. And yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. He said, I have been working like a dog all these years, and you've never once thrown me a party. You've never once gone out of your way to show me that you were glad that I was here, that you loved me, that you cared for me. But he says, verse 30, as soon as this son of yours, now notice that. He doesn't call him a brother. He doesn't say as soon as my brother came home. He said as soon as that son of yours comes back. He says He's devoured your livelihood with harlots. Now, it's interesting he knew that, isn't it? I don't know how he knew that. Did he know more about his brother than the father did? Is he just assuming? Don't know. It would almost imply he might have known a little bit something about Bubba. You killed the fatty calf for him. And he said to him, the father answered him, Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. In other words, it's all here. All these blessings were right here. I mean, you ate of the fruit of the land. You were taken care of. You had shelter. You had peace. You had calm. You had that which was provided. It reminds us of the fact that so many times we do not avail ourselves of the blessings that God gives us. And sometimes we don't consider them and count them. I don't think we can literally sit down and count the blessings, but how many times do we turn around and say thank you for what we have and spend time thinking about what we do have? Clothes on our back, food in our mouth, roof over our heads. Physical health is where we can get out at least and come to church. We have things. We have things around us. We may not have the best, the most, but we have. The father says, you had all this. It was at your disposal. He said, all that I have, it's yours. I remember my mother made a statement once about my father with regards to me. She said, I believe your daddy would give the shirt off of his back to you if you thought you needed it. And I believe Dad would have. I believe he would have. Dad didn't have much, but I believe he would have given me literally his last shirt off of his back if he thought I needed it. Father says, it's all here. It's all for your disposal. And then he goes on to say in verse 31, it was right that we would make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead. He was gone. He was, we didn't know what had happened to him. We considered him as dead, but he's alive again and was lost. He's found. He's come home. Now, I've given you three things to think about with regards to lessons. First of all, sin leads to disgrace, how terrible sin is. Secondly, that God will embrace us. God will take us back. And thirdly, we should note the steps of the prodigal son. There's a sermon in there. The realization that he has, the rising, the returning, the recovery, the renewed interest, and then the reception. This is what God does to sinners. If love is seeking in the first two stories, love is saving in the last story. It reminds us then of this. It reminds us really of two things. It reminds us, first of all, that if we have folks that we know of that are lost, it doesn't matter to what extent we would classify them, and I think that's a terrible term, terrible thought, but it does not matter to what extent they're lost, and they need to come home. We need to do what we can. We need to go, be like the woman that goes and turns on the lights and sweeps the house. We need to search and seek. And so it reminds us that no matter who's out there that's not obeying the gospel, we need to help them. But it reminds us as well of the love of God, that God takes even the most vilest of sinners and is willing to forgive and willing to move on. I had something happen years ago in my preaching that I didn't care for then, and when I think about it, I still don't care for it, but nevertheless, it happened. An individual came forward, church, had been away for a while, and I had talked to them, and they had come back for a few weeks, and one of the Sundays when they came back, they responded to the Lord's invitation. Oh, it was a great day. We prayed for them. They cried. I hugged them. I cried. Like I say, we had prayer for them. Folks, after services, they went, they hugged them. They cried with them. They cried about it. But I had somebody come up and say, Well, what had they been doing all this time? Why did they go forward? And I looked at this individual and I said, well, if you don't know, then it doesn't matter to you. It's not important to you. That's between them and God and the rest of us that know. We don't need to know what's wrong in people's lives. We just need to know, are they in a safe condition? And if not, help them to get to that safe condition. Anything anybody like to add? I've taken up all the time. I'm sorry. Anything anybody like to add? Well, all right. Well, next week we're going to talk about a couple of more of the parables, and we'll talk about them, the unjust judge and the others. A friend at midnight probably is one of them that we'll talk about. But if you will, let's bow for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day, for the opportunity to study your word, for the fact that it is a lamp to our feet and a light into our path. We're thankful that you love us and watch over us, and we're thankful for the care that you give to us. But as we study this lesson this morning, we're most thankful for the forgiveness that you offer to all of us. And no matter our background, no matter where we came from, being individuals that maybe were raised in the church or individuals that realized later in life need for truth and to follow the truth, we're thankful for the fact that we've had those that in our lives that have helped us and led us to you and to your saving grace. Help us to be individuals that might lead others to that very saving grace as well. Be with us, watch over us, bless us, and keep us, and hold us as we hold to you. For this is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Thank y'all so much. You're a great audience. Hope you have a great week.